if I'm eating things that have erythritol, I am massively elevating my risk of stroke and heart attack. Is that what they're saying? This is Generation Health. Every week we bring you news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices to help you live longer and better. To my right, Mr. Dante DiMatteo, registered pharmacist, certified strength and conditioning specialist. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good to see everybody.
And across from me is Joey DiMatteo, registered pharmacist and board-certified clinical nutritionist. How are you?
Very good, Tyler. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm Tyler Andrews, and I just made it through the intro on my first try.
Great work.
Look at me. Look at me go. All right, we got a bunch to talk about on today's show. We're going to talk about erythritol and heart attacks, absolutely terrifying stuff, a way to relieve depression better than counseling and pharmaceuticals. This blows my mind. We've got your questions, but really the thing that I'm here for, the one I want to know more than anything else is on your wall when you were a teenager, what posters and art did you have?
Teenager, mine were kind of lame. I was really into sports, so I just had a couple sports things up. Yeah. And as I got into college, so I guess older teen years, then I got like into the movies. I had like the cliche, different movie stuff.
What's cliche? Come on, tell me.
Freshman. A lot of gangster movies.
I was gonna say Scarface, Godfather.
I love being Italian and love the Italian gangster movies. So a lot of like Godfather, Goodfellas, Scarface.
Yeah.
And a couple like comedies. It was college. You had to be kind of funny or whatever. I'd have like Animal House or something. Excellent. But yeah, we just had like posters. There was a big like poster sale in the middle of like the big lawn that we had.
Yes.
So it was like 18 and everybody went and picked from the same couple hundred posters and put them up on their wall,
I did the same thing.
Yeah, just sports stuff when I was young teen, and then the movie stuff when I was older teen. So
Which sports stuff?
A couple Steelers things, but I always loved a couple like players, Jerry Rice, Barry Sanders. Like I had those same ones up for years.
Fair enough.
Like the same like favorite players I had as a kid.
Do you still have them?
No.
Just threw them away?
Not the actual paper posters. I had some of like the figures and the cards I still have.
Yeah.
But the actual paper posters, no, they didn't survive.
Dante?
Man, I almost can't even rember. Like the
yours
childhood
either.
poster. I was going to ask if you remembered what I had.
I can't remember his.
I mean, I know for sure. Somehow I convinced mom and dad to get me the Outcast album that came out, the speaker box.
Okay.
Love Below.
Yes, yeah.
And that came with all types of like crazy like pictures, and
Did it really?
there was like a little poster in there. And I remember trying to put that up in my room, and that definitely didn't work. They never let me do that.
You had a lot of baseball trophies in your room.
Yeah,
medals and trophies a lot.
Yeah, it was more,
which was cool.
True. Yeah, there was more trophies. It was more trophies.
Displayed your own achievements instead of.
I guess so. We had a couple really good players on our like youth baseball teams and basketball teams that made us like
you played a lot of baseball
pretty darn competitive. Like we had some really elite youth athletes, so that was fun.
What about into college?
Into college, Nick and I, we went and bought like a bunch of the movie posters, like Kid Cudi.
Same thing.
Yeah,
10, 11 years later, the same thing.
Same thing.
I want to hear yours, Tyler. You probably had some really fancy stuff on the wall.
Not fancy stuff. I had.
I don't know what the word is.
I had a lot of good comic book art on my walls.
Okay.
I was raised by a comic book fan and am one myself. And so we had really nice posters that we got dry mounted and then actually had in frames. They're still posters, but they were nice posters.
Yeah.
So we had some really good Batman, mostly Batman. There was an Iron Man poster that I loved. There's a Spider-Man that I loved. A couple of Spider-Mans that I still have. I still have all of these and they're all still framed. But I put them in my kids' rooms. So now it's not me anymore. It's them.
They're comic book fans too?
Not really. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even in today's day and age, you think it's very easy to be with the movies.
Well, and that's just part of it. There's no countercultural element to it anymore. It's not an outsider thing.
Okay.
And now we've lost all of our audience. I'm so sorry. All right. So this question came to us from Deborah via YouTube. She messaged us on there. She said, I've been taking your probiotic essentials for years. I know they're of good quality. My question is, should I be taking different ones on occasion? So we have several different probiotics. You got the base probiotic pro, and then the 225 and the 100s and I don't even know what all the differences are. She's wondering if she needs to change it up.
Yeah. I think this would be a good refresher just of, looking at not only the quality of specific supplements, like just in general with supplements, but specifically probiotics. So, for example, our dad Joe, he sought out a specific manufacturer initially for, the formulation of the probiotic essentials. He had them, he not only wanted a specific sort of milieu of probiotic strains, but wanted to make sure that they were shelf stable, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
All of that's to say that the manufacturing process of a probiotic specifically is really important. Shelf stability of a probiotic supplement is really important. And then finally, to make sure that, the final product and testing of the probiotic is really important.
Right.
And so with the probiotic essentials and with the others that we carry, that all of those criteria are met. Some of them you refrigerate, some of them you do not. The probiotic essentials specifically, this company utilizes like some sort of freeze drying technique in different things that are encapsulating the actual strains that are keeping them active by the time they actually make it to consumer, and then last through their expiration dates. And again, we just look at, is the manufacturer GMP compliant? So there's good manufacturing processes. The FDA inspection of the labs is important. Again, especially with something, especially when you're dealing with something like a probiotic. So I know I wanted that to be much shorter, but again, we talked about fish oils too. Like there are some products that the facility that it's coming from is massively important. All of those things outside of the actual product itself are critical here. And so with those products, whether she stays with probiotic essentials or moves to the Pro 100 or whatever, they're all met. All of those criteria are met.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, just the one quick thing about the testing, and you covered it all, except one little point that we've actually had them tested at expiration date too. Mm-hmm. That's obviously not something you can do right away, but we had them tested at expiration to make sure, and the company kind of knows this going in. There's going to be some degradation. And sometimes this will backfire because people will say, oh, well, these like a fresh batch and things like that. But in terms of what's on the label, technically they are a little high. They're over label whenever we first make them, and then they're still above label whenever they're at their expiration date. Because again, when you're dealing with live organisms, there's going to be some degradation. You're opening and closing a bottle, that kind of thing. So I think that's a key thing too, is because if somebody's making them right. If they're testing the levels right at whenever they're made, and then not at 3 years later, and if they're just barely making cutoff initially, you could be well below label at expiration.
They really
that's one thing too. Yeah, it's not something my dad would have thought of, per se, but that's something that, when you're working with a good reputable company, that they kind of foresee for you. Like, hey, we know whatever. If you're going to put 2.5 years on this, there could be 15%, that kind of thing. And they kind of guided us in that. But yeah, we've actually had them tested at expiration.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Deborah is wondering, should she change it up? Is there a reason if she's taking the essentials and it's working, is there a reason for her to change up?
Yeah. So it would be useful to know, potentially why she started taking them.
Yep.
I think that would provide at least a good framework to, help better answer questions like this, regardless of what the product is. But let's say theoretically, maybe she had some constipation, or there was some sort of GI disturbance, or she had, a long history of antibiotic use, any of those sort of, glaring indications where probiotics could be beneficial. So if we just pretend maybe that's the case, she heard they were healthy, or let's just say she heard they were good for, colonizing the gut and for all that kind of stuff. In that case, there would really be no reason to switch it up, just as a general answer. Yeah. Now, if she was still, having, whether it's diarrhea or constipation or issues associated with chronic antibiotic use, there are different products, and we don't maybe necessarily need to go through every single one. There are different products that are basically just have a greater number of specific strains that could be better tailored to fit a certain indication and turn up the volume a little bit. But I don't want to say that with like utmost kind of confidence either, because there's really just not a lot out there in the way of like this specific amount of strains is perfect for this specific indication.
Right.
And we, it's tough. I mean, this is an active area of research, but we know sort of logically, you may not be best suited to throw a general product like that at something where she has such a specific GI issue or a, urogenital issue, something like that.
So if she's just taking them because they're a great idea, they're kind of one of the essential things that is often recommended, and everything seems fine, stick with it, no reason to change. But if she was taking them for a specific issue and is not having the relief that she would expect, then it's time to consider amping it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I think too, just down into a more specific, we're always going to be kind of middle ground here. There are reasons why you need to take an antibiotic, period.
Yeah.
If you are at that point in time, and for whatever reason you need to take an antibiotic, there is a very specific different one we recommend. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because essentially it colonizes in the colon, but it's a yeast derivative, yeast cell wall, essentially, that an antibiotic that kills bacterial cell walls. It's really how they work. Primarily, they're breaking apart the cell walls of these organisms. Can't touch this flora probiotic, Saccharomyces boulardii. It congregates in the colon as well, which is where you get a lot of the short-term side effects of antibiotics, the diarrhea, etc.
Right.
So if you're on an antibiotic, your probiotic's essentially going to get killed. So you switch over to something like Flora and you take it while you're on it.
Okay.
Secondarily, along those lines, if you've gone through the antibiotic, maybe you've had some complications. Maybe they've had to change your antibiotic because it wasn't the right one or wasn't working. Maybe you've had a little battle. Then you may want a little bit of a reset, especially if some of the GI symptoms are going on. A little prolonged afterwards, then you would do something like a 225 or a 100 for a period of time. You do like a little taper, use the 225 for 15 days, use the 100 for a month, then go back to the probiotic essential, something like that, just to kind of recolonize in a shorter term. If again, your average, 7 days of amoxicillin is probably not going to cause that for the average person, but some people have histories.
Yeah.
Even if it's been 5-10 years, they have a long history of antibiotic use. Again, sometimes people, you do have a little battle where you're switching and you're on different ones or you're on a second course 3 weeks later, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a little reset is warranted. Also something like leaky gut, which can be manifesting in other things. You could have some skin issues, some joint issues, some just chronic diarrhea, chronic nausea, things like that potentially maybe is leaky gut caused, that you do a little more of intensive treatment for that. There are other products you would use to kind of help close those junctions in the gut, soothe the gut. So there are other things you'd use, or maybe you're having some indigestion, you'd use an enzyme. So there are other gut health things, but it's specifically back to the probiotics. Yeah, that's still foundational if you're having GI issues, we believe. And then into that leaky gut and into the antibiotic use, those are just some nuances to it.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So for general folks, beyond just was it Deborah? Mm-hmm. Yes, beyond Deborah, if somebody is taking a probiotic, an antibiotic, it's worth switching over to the Flora Essentials. Taking your probiotics isn't going to help anything in that moment. You want to go to the Flora Essentials and then do the reset with maybe some 225 down to 100, down to the Essentials. Got it. Okay, cool. I hope that helps, Deborah. If you have a question, the best way to get them to us is to email them to us at questions@askjoedimatteo.com. Questions@askjoedimatteo.com. All right. So moving on, freaking out. 0-calorie sweetener linked to heart attack and stroke. Study finds. This from CNN. A sugar replacement called erythritol, used to add bulk to sweeten things like stevia, monk fruit, and keto-reduced sugar products, has been linked to blood clotting, stroke, heart attack, and death, according to a new study. Quote, "The degree of risk was not modest," said the lead study author, Dr. Stanley Hazen, director of the Center for Cardiovascular Diagnostic and Prevention at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner Research Institute. People with existing risk factors for heart disease, such as diabetes, were twice as likely to experience a heart attack or stroke if they had the highest levels of erythritol in their blood, according to the study published Monday in the journal Nature Medicine. Quote, "If your blood level of erythritol was in the top 25% compared to the bottom 25%, there was about a 2-fold higher risk of heart attack and stroke. It's on a par with the strongest of cardiac risk factors like diabetes," Hazen said. Additional lab and animal research presented in the paper revealed that erythritol appeared to be causing blood platelets to clot more readily. Clots can break off and travel to the heart, triggering a heart attack, or to the brain, triggering a stroke. And then we've got other articles here, one from Fox. We've got the actual study. There's a bunch. This made a bunch of waves. What are these studies actually saying? What is he say? It sounds like if I'm eating things that have erythritol, I am massively elevating my risk of stroke and heart attack. Is that what they're saying?
I mean, this definitely grabbed me at first, so like first look, I'm like, wow, so we'll get to some of the nuances of this, but I mean, I think you summed it up. But basically, if you're in the top 25% of a cohort of people with existing risk factors, now that has its own issues when you're studying only people with risk factors, but again, we'll get into some of that. Such as diabetes, one of the major risk factors for a cardiovascular event. If you're in that top 25%, you have a twofold higher risk of heart attack and stroke than if you're in the bottom 25%. I mean, that's pretty. That's I think the gist of the study to me. Yeah. So, and then they kind of dabbled in, well, we're going to show that clotting is the cause of this, and we're going to show that by using platelet-rich plasma and very high concentrations of erythritol, putting them in a petri dish together and seeing if the clotting increases, which they did see. Now, again, I don't want to keep going off in different tangents. There's issues with that, with the study. I mean, platelet-rich plasma, by the name, you can tell is not exactly how things are in your blood. It's platelet-rich version of that. Right. So you've got way higher platelets, and then you've got this concentration that is way higher, even though it was in the highest 25% cohort that they found. Then they used some mice models, which is notoriously bad for studying cardiovascular disease anyway, and humans. It's just a very poor model. So you've got those issues that again we'll kind of go over again because I think they're critical. But yeah, it's essentially saying that if you're taking your erythritol, that you're going to have much higher risk of a heart attack and stroke. I think that's the gist of the study.
I eat a modified diet. I have not a lot, but I have more than 0 erythritol in my diet. This is concerning.
And I think that's key too, just to take a minute. I don't want to turn this into like a science class, but I just think there are a few basic points of what erythritol is. Mm-hmm. It's a sugar alcohol or a polyol. Okay, it contains no sugar or alcohol. But so you have to remember, alcohol is we immediately think of it as maybe isopropyl, or of course, the alcohol that's in beer and whiskey. Right. But it's really just a chemical term. Okay. And ethyl alcohol or isopropyl alcohol is the manifestation that we use and just call alcohol. So it's a sugar alcohol. It's got a bunch of OH groups. And again, I don't want to get too technical, but that's really all it is. Okay. It's a non-nutritive sweetener. Okay. It essentially has no calories. One source you read will say no calories. The other sources will say more specifically 0.2 to 0.4 calories a gram, which the FDA standards allow you to round down to 0. But functionally, that's very low. You're talking 0.2 calories per gram of this stuff. Even if you're eating 30 grams of it, you're still talking pretty negligible. And what was interesting is that it does not spike your blood sugar at all. So a carbohydrate, you take it in, and your body, essentially it causes a blood sugar spike in your body to some varying degree at some varying time, which is where you get into the different carbs and the multigrains and the white breads, etc. So even though it's technically a carb, it is in the fiber category where you can subtract it out. Oh, so if there's a total amount of carbs, you would be able to subtract out something like erythritol because it doesn't cause those blood sugar spikes.
So that's why it's used in all these foods.
Yes. And the other reason is it's got physical properties like sugar. So it's used for the bulk and the mouthfeel of sugar. Okay. But it's only 60% is sweet. So that's why and I think it's critical to say that you tip in a lot of foods, especially like Halo Top ice cream or different things that we're eating that are now pretty cutting edge. Yep. They have a lot of erythritol in it. You are talking high amounts. So again, that's why it kind of grabbed me at first, because this is a new hot thing. Yeah. It's in all these like cutting edge foods that is all in these low calorie foods. And, so it definitely grabbed me, at least initially. So it is found in small amounts in fruits and vegetables, very small amounts. So it is natural in that sense. But the way it's made industrially, because you need these higher amounts, it's typically made from corn. They're finding ways to make it from pears, et cetera, but it's really made from corn. Yeah. And it ends up the same product. So it's one of those technicalities. It's it's a natural sweetener that's artificially derived.
Right.
Because it ends up the same chemical that's in the Halotop ice cream that you're eating or in the sweet is the same thing that's in the fruit, just in wildly different amounts.
Right.
There are some theories that exist, and we can go into some of this, that similar to some of the other artificial sweeteners, that you are dealing with a brain gut response, some brain signaling, that you're still taking in something sweet, and that is tricking the brain. And then it can lead to some impaired insulin sensitivity, some reduced insulin sensitivity,
Interesting,
increased insulin resistance, and increased food craving and weight gain. So you hear a lot of people, the Halotop, they're eating the whole pint, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Part of it's psychological because you feel like you can, but is there some of this going on, the brain gut signaling, where you're taking in something sweet, the body believes it's sugar, the brain believes it's sugar, there is a brain gut relationship. So I didn't go into that in real depth,
right?
But I think that is something that's always kind of out there when you're talking about these artificial sweeteners themselves. They're never as innocent, even in the sugar alcohol way, which seems like the best way to do it,
right?
In terms of something like the hardcore chemicals like aspartame, that's still out there, I would say. Then lastly, to kind of wrap this up, bloating, flatulence, gas. There's varying things. Some people don't believe you're going to have that unless you're eating, because you can kind of calculate your tolerance to it. You can really, it's 1 gram per kilogram or 0.45 grams per pound of erythritol per body weight. So 150 pound person theoretically can eat 68 grams, we'll say, of erythritol without flatulence. People will swear that's not the case. But again, you get to the whole thing, or eating the whole pint, etc.
Right.
So that's also out there. And that's going to be, I think, a varying response. I don't think you can go with calculations like that when you're talking about a symptom. Some people are going to have some flatulence and gas with it at lower amounts than other people.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But if it's going to kill me, how about I don't eat it? Am I going to die from this?
I think, this segues us into the big, and I think that's what Joey was kind of holding off and saying.
I appreciate it.
But firstly, I think that was a great introduction and overview of what erythritol is and, what it looks like in our day-to-day lives and in our diets and food products and all this kind of stuff. It's everywhere at this point.
Yeah.
And I was guilty of eating the entire tubs of Halotop.
Especially initially when it came out.
I titrated my dose of Halotop up until the gas cleared out an entire room. So, and all my roommates can attest to that.
It doesn't help that on the side of it says serving size, whatever, a half a cup, 4 servings, but then right next to it also says entire pint and has all the nutritional facts right there.
I think the entire calories is on the front too. Like it's just like prepping you to eat that whole thing.
Yeah. I totally can eat this whole thing. This is totally okay.
Yeah, man, it is funny to
Don't
think.
do that.
It is funny to think, like, in college, I mean, I still drink a lot of like energy drinks now, Monster energy drinks and stuff, but Quest bars, those protein bars filled with erythritol.
Yeah.
I'd have an energy drink or two for studying for the gym, decent amount of erythritol. And then at night, we'd watch Game of Thrones. I'd eat an entire tub of Halotop, which is 20 grams of erythritol. So I was like, I think like 2016, I was like the king of erythritol, basically.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised you're still alive. I mean, based on this study.
Yeah. So basically, the big turning point or distinction or kind of change in understanding of this whole thing, in addition to erythritol being found in food products, our body makes erythritol. We produce it endogenously. And so what this study failed to do was actually account for any sort of dietary consumption. Like, they weren't measuring how much people were consuming at baseline. There was basically none of that. And also a lot of, experts not involved in the study, they made the point that erythritol at the time of the start of like some of these cohorts, erythritol wasn't even really being used that frequently as a food additive. So realistically, there wasn't really the potential that people were consuming such crazy high amounts, at the inception of this.
So you're saying that this study was probably just measuring endogenous erythritol, erythritol that people's own bodies were producing because our bodies produce it. Mm-hmm. That's what it was actually measuring, and it had nothing to do with their diet.
And one of the ways in which we produce glucose has the byproduct because they are chemically similar. So it's a byproduct of one of the ways in which we produce glucose, pentose pathway. So it's, that's the technical term and mechanism for how.
Yeah. Basically, the study gives us no ability to determine if dietary consumption of erythritol is what is contributing to these major adverse cardiovascular events. So essentially what it's reaffirming is that when you're looking at a, metabolically sicker population, and I know that's sort of a crude way to describe it, but look, I mean, this is a patient population that has generally much higher average BMIs. There's higher instances of diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, heart failure, history of heart attacks. I mean, it's all listed in there. So this is
all those comorbidities come together often.
Yes. It's it's generally older populations.
Yep.
So you're dealing with the cohort who was at much higher risk of these events to begin with. And so we know that circulating blood levels of erythritol, it's an artifact of a cohort like this. So sort of the more oxidative stress, the sicker, so to speak, that somebody is, the more likely that you are to see these higher circulating levels of erythritol. And so it's not that there's not any sort of input from dietary erythritol. It's just that the study
didn't measure
it fails to kind of determine any of that.
Wow.
And so to go back to some of the top hits on a Google search: artificial sweetener erythritol linked to increase in heart attacks, strokes. Sweetener erythritol may increase risk for stroke, blood clot, death. So it is crazy and unfortunate to see that linked back to those sorts of things. Again, the erythritol is more of an artifact of somebody that is already dealing with a great deal of metabolic stress. They have these underlying comorbidities, and like Joey said, what happens with the pentose phosphate pathway, essentially, it's one of the pathways where glucose is metabolized. Erythritol is just among many one of the notable byproducts, and so central adiposity, or having increased body fat, there's the potential for increased erythritol in circulation from that alone. Let alone if somebody has hyperglycemia, that's a whole other sort of risk to have increased erythritol in the blood. So what you're seeing is something that essentially just kind of makes all the sense. That there's virtually no way to determine that this is being caused.
Yeah, and I think that's a critical point. The actual quote, we found that the concentration of erythritol was higher in the group with higher glycemia. So, I mean, I'm going to infer that the group with higher glycemia not only has a higher risk of a heart attack and stroke, that they're not consuming a lot of erythritol.
Right.
Because, I mean, certainly, yes, if a lower amount of blood glucose intake or carb intake of somebody whose insulin response is impaired is going to have a higher level. Yes, I don't, their body's not going to process it as well as somebody without diabetes. I get that. But in general, to generalize, they've got a higher risk because they have it, and they probably are not consuming entire gallons of Halo Top ice cream.
Right.
Okay. So versus the group with lower glycemia at study baseline. So I think that's critical. So it's more of an after marker of risk than it is a predictor. And if you lower your erythritol level somehow or intake, that then you're going to lower your risk. It's just a marker after the fact. It's,
Joey mentioned it at the outset, was that they also tried to look at platelet aggregation, like in a mechanistic way. And so
they had an idea of what was causing this. They've decided, so now they're going to test it.
Yeah, and so that was a huge part of it. And yes, they were able to see that platelet aggregation, which is a huge step in clot formation in the body. They saw that was apparent with very high concentrations of erythritol. But we also know that there are a multitude of other platelet aggregation studies unrelated to this, when viewed in this mechanistic or petri dish sort of setting, that they're just not always applicable to what happens in the body.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, they just kind of like it was just a double down on something that we can't really use.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
And again, I know I said it before, but again, they used platelet-rich plasma, which is an extract of the blood that's platelet-rich.
Yeah.
And then they used extremely high concentrations, much higher than we're even in the highest percentage of the cohort. So again, you're setting it up for an unnatural.
So if you're shooting up erythritol,
Yeah.
you might be causing yourself some problems, but eating a serving of
Yeah.
that.
And I think, hey, even though we feel like it's essentially debunked, there's some smoke here, if you want to say, okay. And I still think that it goes back to moderation. That the whole, I always keep hitting on Halo Top here, but it is the one that stands out to me. That maybe entire boxes of erythritol confections and entire pints of. Or maybe just something that you don't want to do. That we're still going to always believe in moderation. Yeah, if you're getting 30 grams of erythritol, I don't know. That's still a ton of one substance. And so if there's any smoke here at all, it still just maybe goes back to that whatever you're doing, moderation is still the way to go.
Exactly. And then there's even studies showing that there are some modest benefits from having a little bit of erythritol in your diet.
Really?
You know what I mean? So you look at it, there are studies that show that it has positive effects on body weight and hemoglobin A1C, massive things, but that doesn't also mean that you use 16 packets every time you try to sweeten a drink or something. I don't know. It is a shame that there's really not a ton to do with that you can really do with this. And then also with a lot of these nutritional type studies, it also is a matter of like, what are you replacing with? Are you like, if you're replacing saturated fat in your diet, are you replacing it with more bread, more cereal, or are you replacing it with, monounsaturated fats? Are you replacing it with avocado and different nuts and different oils? Like, the same question applies here, is that you would be hard pressed to find many negatives for somebody who were to replace a lot of their sugar sweetened beverages with a beverage that's mainly sweetened with something like erythritol. You know what I mean? Because you inherently are decreasing that person's consumption of added sugars on a given day. So all of that's to say it matters what you're replacing it with.
Yeah.
If you're just adding a ton of erythritol to a diet that's already high in sugar and such, I mean, that's probably not the best thing aside from all this.
Right.
But replacement's always key. Context is always key with, nutritional related interventions.
That's a big point. Absolutely.
I mean, hey, there are other sweeteners too.
Yeah.
I mean, xylitol, not safe for animals and such, but in general, you can use xylitol. You can use allulose. You can use stevia. There's monk fruit. There's combinations, like Truvia is a combination of erythritol and stevia. So even just micromanaging this whole sweetener thing a little further, you can mix up your sweeteners. Don't always drink Monster. Have a coffee and mix some stevia in it.
Well, just really don't always drink Monster, I think is the punchline here. But oh my gosh. All right. Well, we got a question on Facebook. This one's from Danny. Danny messaged us over there. It said, I am taking Prograf for a lung transplant. This is a big deal. I recently changed from 1 milligram in the morning and 1 milligram in the evening to 0.5 milligram in the morning and 1 in the evening to lower my tacrolimus, FK506. I'm not sure what that is, but you do. That's the important part. From 14.2 to below 10. My question is, does Prograf metabolize faster during wake time or sleep time? In other words, should he be taking the 0.5 in the morning and the 1 at night, or the other way around to even out the levels in his system?
Yeah, so I looked up a direct answer to his question.
Okay.
But similar to maybe what we just went over, I don't think it gives you the ultimate answer.
Okay.
So there was a study that found that maximum blood levels and essentially total area under the curve, which is a
real
chemical
technical
graph way of saying total dosing effect or total amount of drug that's in your body.
Yeah.
Was lower after a night dose than a morning dose.
Okay.
So there are some circadian rhythm processing differences.
Okay.
So again, that on its face would say, hey, and maybe that's where he just looked that up and he saw that and he's like, hey, that means that I need to
change how he's doing it.
Yes. So, but to me, it does not lead that. So here's a couple reasons. To get technical, your half-life is roughly 12 hours. So that's half of the drug will be eliminated in your body in roughly 12 hours.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold on. Pause for a second.
Yeah.
Help me, because I have not had a lung transplant. What is this
Sorry, I should
medication?
have
What's it
started there.
doing?
It's a critical drug. It's essentially an immunosuppressant, which in general is not good, but when you've just had a foreign lung transplant into your body is what's needed to prevent rejection. Because at that point, that is
anti-rejection
that's the number one thing that you're trying to avoid at that point. You're not as concerned about some more minor illnesses. You're concerned about this lung taking and not being rejected by the body.
Yes.
So you're suppressing the immune system.
And he's going to be taking this for the rest of his life.
For at least a very long time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't want to get too into that, but yeah, for a long time.
Okay.
So, and I will even back up a little bit. That was good. So that's key thing. It's also dosed to levels.
Okay.
Yes. Thyroid, maybe some hormones, testosterone, etc. You're dosing to a level and symptoms, this blend. Tacrolimus, you're dosing to a level, period. It's a very narrow therapeutic drug. And what that means is that small dose changes can cause it to be lower than it needs to be and not be effective, or higher and cause some side effects. So that's what sort of narrow therapeutic index drug is, and you're dosing to the level.
Okay.
So he's going to get blood work very often, and so it's not about effect so much. Obviously, that's ultimately what you care about.
Right.
But day to day, month to month, blood work to blood work, it's about the level.
So that's why he's being cautious about minimizing and maximizing in the morning and evening. Okay.
Yes. So again, well, now we just saw there's some difference in the morning and evening. Why wouldn't you want to alternate that? Because he's dosing to level. So I would leave it steady, because what I would hate to see is for him to maybe one day have blood work done when he took the night dose higher, and then it was off a little bit. So then they change his dose, or they don't, or they're monitoring it, and he goes back in the next week, but it's the one after the morning dose was higher. And so then you're introducing, the body can change in how it's metabolizing this over time. Anyway, there's other drugs you're taking. There's other stress levels. There's plenty of different circadian rhythm issues we've seen. So there's plenty of things that are going to affect potential changes, even if you're compliant and take it at the same time every day, etc. So now you're going to throw in that variable to maybe your blood work's being done whenever you've taken a different dose during the night than another day of blood work, because you're doing this alternation. You're introducing another variable. So I think that's more the reason not to do it than to do it.
Okay.
And then further back to the technical stuff, it's a 12-hour half-life. So half the drug is gone in 12 hours. And your steady state, basically the basic level, is after the third day. So it's not this drug that's is 2-hour half-life and is going to be going up and down in your body like crazy all day. It's got a pretty steady half-life, 12 hours. And basically the body needs 4 to 5 half-lives roughly to eliminate the drug. So you've got a pretty significant window there that I think that you could do more damage by alternating the dose. I don't think it's the end of the world, but I think you could do more damage alternating it because of the next day blood testing than the benefit of it.
Okay. All right. So bottom line, whatever you're doing, whatever your doctor said, stick with it until they tell you otherwise, because you're trying to hit a narrow window. So the fewer variables, the better.
Yes.
In this case.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's cool. Today I learned, you know what else I learned? Exercise is best for depression. This is from SciPost, big old study. This is really cool. While traditional treatments such as therapy and medication can be effective, our new research highlights the importance of exercise in managing these conditions. Our recent study, published by the British Journal of Sports Medicine, reviewed more than 1,000 research trials examining the effects of physical activity on depression, anxiety, and psychological distress. It showed exercise is an effective way to treat mental health issues and can be even more effective than medication or counseling. The largest improvements, as self-reported by the participants, that's relevant, were seen in people with depression, HIV, kidney disease, in pregnant and postpartum women, in healthy individuals, though clear benefits were seen for all populations. We found the higher the intensity of exercise, the more beneficial it is, and exercising for 6 to 12 weeks has the greatest benefits rather than shorter periods. When comparing the size of the benefits of exercise to other common treatments for mental health conditions from previous systematic reviews, our findings suggest exercise is around 1.5 times more effective than either medication or cognitive behavioral therapy. What?
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. Why is this not on all the headlines? What is going on?
In my estimation, we have a bit of an erythritol situation here.
I'm glad with erythritol. I'm bummed about this one. Okay.
Yeah. And honestly, with a lot of these studies, reading these studies, it's important for Joey and I, for Tyler, to read them and get an understanding for them. And even though Joey and I went to pharmacy school and we had biostatistics courses and we had courses that, were to help us interpret scientific literature, this is no joke, trying to not only understand what the studies have done, but looking for bias, trying to make sure the methods are sound.
Right.
And then you factor something in like a systematic review who takes a bunch of different studies,
over
puts them together.
1,000.
Right. And so then, the point is it's a challenge. So often I will defer to different epidemiologists who it's literally their job is to look at the big picture, kind of oftentimes they end up being the ones to put a little bit of a damper on an observational trial, or, putting a bit of a damper on a headline that's out there, that kind of thing. So there's a dude on Twitter, Health Nerd, who is an epidemiologist. He's brilliant, and I often look to see what his what his take is on different studies. And he did point out a few different things that I noticed as well. So we'll just chip away at some things, the pros, the cons, the takeaways, it's not that this is a total erythritol type situation where we're going to end up saying that you should quit exercising or something.
Exercise isn't helping. Stop it.
It doesn't go that far. But so an example of kind of what I'm saying here is there were 97 reviews within this, an entire study. Most of them, 77 out of the 97, had a critically low AmStar rating. And so AmStar is just a tool that, that gives you criteria to rate other systematic reviews. And so basically 77 out of 97 of them were critically low. So they were almost, I wouldn't say like they were junk studies per se, but they were studies that you have to kind of take with a grain of salt.
Got it.
Basically, on a fundamental level. And only 7 of them were rated as high quality.
They were the erythritol of studies.
They were, exactly.
Taste sweet, but not a lot of content.
So yeah. So to kind of set the stage with that, we're not necessarily we're not necessarily operating on even ground.
Got it.
So there's just a flaw kind of right off the bat.
I'll bump in for a second. What is CBT? You mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy. What is that?
And I guess that's what's tough, because then I didn't want to go in a direction where I started like saying what Dante said in like my own ways, because I didn't go into the depth that he did. And there was a couple of reasons, besides just that takes a lot of work and effort. And that number one is because I know exercise is good. Yeah. So even if the details of this I can't hang my hat on, the general gist of it I feel is positive. Mm-hmm. So I kind of go into a mode, just being honest, where then I'm almost like erythritoling it like this, like they did in the study, where you've got that's the version you want to go with, as they did in the study. So they kept rolling with it. Yeah. And I have a tendency to do something where I know the overall greater good is here, so I rolled that way. Now, where I think that it becomes problematic, and this is where I'll segue into CBT, is that when they start saying it's more effective than medication or CBT, that's when it gets a little scary, is because now you're challenging the standards and you're challenging other good things.
Right.
So instead of just saying that exercise is good, they had to take it to that point and say it's better than CBT, because exercise is difficult to do for the average person if you're not doing it. And so is CBT.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're more prone to be able to exercise than CBT, or maybe you've hit a plateau with CBT or whatever. Now you're going to like change gears and say, well, this is more effective anyway, or I don't like this medication, I'm going off of my med. Now you've entered this whole thing. So that's where my problem with it was like the ultimate conclusion, more so maybe than Dante has kind of hit on the details. I'm hitting on kind of the overarching issue.
No, I mean, I guess that's what I wanted to get to. Yeah. Really, was how can you then make such a bold claim if 77 out of 97 of these are kind of like shaky to begin with?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's mine was just one leg.
Definitely
in favor of that.
Definitely.
For sure.
And for sure. And I think that, so then just to kind of get to the question. So CBT, there's different ways you could frame it. Then there's more technical ways, but basically, it's an assumption that some of the issues that you're having psychologically are due to faulty or unhelpful ways of thinking.
Okay.
So basically, yes, you're having a psychological issue like anxiety, let's say, and it's because your brain you've trained your brain for whatever reason to maybe soothe or comfort or to respond in a certain way that's harmful. So what you do with CBT is you say, well, here's the issue and here's how I normally think. Well, here's another way to think. And it's a training, it's like a retraining of your brain psychologically to say, hey, when I have to public speak, or this is the extreme example, when I have to give a speech and I'm instantly nervous because it's scary to me,
right.
I need to think of it that how I'll feel afterwards and the accomplishment and that I'm prepared. And that's a very simple example in the most like kind of extreme, most obvious anxieties. Then you start getting into things about, trauma and things like that. It gets very tricky.
Right.
So I think that was tricky too, was that, CBT is so critical and relatively new and cutting edge for how you treat a lot of these issues that are psychological. But then they went into, it was most effective for HIV and pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
what is that about?
Wait, like what does CBD have to do with HIV? I know that then those are like secondary issues.
Right.
You can have some psychological issues if you have HIV because you're dealing with this hideous condition.
Right.
Or because for a pregnant woman, your body's changing and you're under all these stresses.
Hormones are all over the place.
So those are like secondary though.
Yeah.
The anxiety is the primary thing you're dealing with. And I could see measuring that. But when they were measuring benefits in HIV, I'm like, well, I don't know. They're really dealing with something secondary here. And then comparing it to CBT, I don't know. I thought that's definitely where it got a little wonky for me.
Yeah. No, I think it's why it's always hard to like, it's like you dichotomize these treatments and these things. And it just, I don't know, it makes for a tough conversation. It's like, really it comes down to like, what kind of language are we using? We have to make sure we say this the right way. We're not saying that exercise is bad and that's not important for somebody with HIV.
Right.
It's just, you're really digging deep to try to make the claim, to try to make the deeper claims.
It seems like it makes really great headlines, but not such great science.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the, one of the other big parts of this that caused me some problems was that in the selection criteria in the search strategy part of the study, they mentioned that after careful consideration and discussion, we decided to exclude reviews where greater than 25% of component randomized controlled trials compared physical activity to pharmaceutical interventions. And so they
translate that. What does that mean?
Yeah. So they basically,
as they're determining which studies to include,
they've excluded the studies that compared exercise to medication.
Wait, what? But they just made the claim that it works better.
The ultimate point of this. That's crazy.
I mean, it's in there in plain writing.
Wow.
So
I did not catch that.
So I don't know. I don't know
my
if that's like, I
gosh.
don't know if that's like, I wouldn't go as far as saying like this was a case of cherry picking or whatever to strengthen what they showed. I wouldn't go that far, but it's odd. I mean, it's definitely an odd part of this. And so, I don't know. I wanted to make sure we didn't miss that.
I'm so frustrated by this.
Mm-hmm. To use the erythritol example, for somebody who has diabetes, adding some erythritol to your diet to, again, replace a sugar sweetened beverage, that could be a great strategy. But that person may also just have they might just have higher erythritol in their blood as an artifact of the diabetes or of different conditions that they have, right?
Right.
Physical activity for somebody who doesn't have these depressive symptoms or symptoms of anxiety, exercise that they're doing is like an artifact of being in a good mental state, right? So I think that's kind of what Joey was saying too. And then again, that doesn't mean we don't want to like recommend exercise,
right?
But trying to slap exercise down as a treatment potentially just doesn't make any sense.
That gets a little scary.
It does. I mean,
especially in place of.
It's an adjunct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, in place of. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, it's a correlative measure. You know what I mean? People that have hemoglobin A1C within range, or they don't have hypertension. They're often the same people that exercise,
right?
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the exercise that the treatment that caused X and Y, or the exercise was what caused the depressive, the symptoms of depression to go away. So it's, I don't know,
in some of this,
weird,
it's kind of a chicken and egg. We're not really sure which is here first.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, I think too, I just looked up benefits of exercise, or whenever I was putting this together. And again, these are very broad terms. They're not black or white in terms of their effect. But we just look at some of the benefits. Inflammation helps lower inflammation, helps lower oxidative stress on the body, helps the endocrine system.
Yeah.
And you say, well, how? Well, there are certain exercises that over time increase your testosterone.
Yeah.
Could be low in a man, could be help, bone building in women over time, your health. Your blood sugar levels helps to increase insulin sensitivity. When your blood sugar's off, you can have plenty of mood issues. And so it's helping with that. And I think the other thing I've found, self-esteem.
Yeah.
Things like that we know, and it's helping all these things. The one that really hit me was self-efficacy. And I had to look up the term. I mean, you kind of can infer what it means, but what does it really mean?
Yeah.
Belief and ability to execute behaviors necessary to promote specific performance attainments. So basically, it's a marker of your ability to get motivated and to achieve certain things. If you've worked out you hit your goal of three times that week, or whatever your goal is. So it reflects confidence in the ability to exert control over one's own motivation, behavior in certain environments, social environments. So I think you start to get into that. It's a mix of self-esteem and self-efficacy that you start to feel better about yourself, that then you're sort of extrapolating that potentially to a relationship or to your work or whatever, that you're hitting certain goals, you're improving in this way, you're healthier. You've got some endocrine benefits, self-esteem benefits. You've got some endorphin rush. You've got all these things kind of building that can help you in other ways.
Right.
That's not in this study.
Right.
And it does not, again, go back to that means that it's 1.5 times as effective as CBD for people with kidney disease or medication. I can get a medication for kidney disease.
Right.
But
it's just that you automatic, the tendency, the reaction is to read those things and then just say, well, that's a perfect treatment.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
mean, that's the law. That's the
why
reasoning.
would I take an antidepressant with all the side
sick of
effects?
my med. I'm going to go to a personal trainer. I'm sick of CBT. I've been doing it for 4 weeks. It's not doing what I want it to do. It's hard. I'm not able to do it. It's hard to put into practice, so I'm going to stop going. And now a month later, I'm going to my personal trainer. And those are things that all need to be combined. And
for sure, they're all pieces of that puzzle.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. And it's, again, it's it's our natural reaction to want to infer that is a treatment, but the data is simply not there.
Right.
It's simply not there.
So you should exercise. It may
super great for you.
Help reduce your depression or your anxiety. It may give you all of these psychological benefits, but you don't do it expressly for that reason.
Or in lieu of.
But you definitely don't do it in lieu of other forms of treatment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Headlines leading us astray.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like the antidepressants, for example. That step is what helps people get out of bed.
Yes.
And so
get to therapy.
You can't go to the gym. You can't go to your garage. You can't get outside if you're still not over step 1 and 1A, 1B, 1C. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's a great point.
Well, that was one of the things that I thought was hilarious was that article said 1.5 times more effective than these other things. And all I could think was, why not both?
Right.
Why not all of the above?
Yeah, exactly.
Even if it does work that well, why not just add it on?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that would be a better option than replacing, and turns out it is.
Yeah. The study saying exercise is good for you gets no headlines. But unfortunately, where we are with everything from politics to studies is you're kind of mentally going for the hottest headline and the hottest resolution that you can get so that you get the likes and the promotes, and it's unfortunately just where everything is.
All right. Well, we'll be the ones to tell you the boring story. Hey, you should exercise. It's good for you. No new research there. Just FYI, you should exercise. It's good for you. All right. Well, if any of that hit home, fantastic. All the products that we mentioned, especially in that first couple questions, all those products are available on our website. They are at askjoedimatteo.com, askjoedimatteo.com. That site is also where you can sign up for our mailing list. You can see past episodes of the show, Find classic episodes of the radio show that started all of this, Ask the Pharmacist. And if you have any questions, we want to hear them. Questions at askjoedimatteo.com. Email those to us. That's the best way to get them to us. We need those. We always like them. Show notes, anything you heard us talk about, we're going to link those, even if they're bad studies that you probably shouldn't pay too much attention to. We'll link them anyway, so you can learn not to pay attention to those headlines. And if you're only listening, you are missing half the fun. Every episode is available as video as well. You can get that on YouTube. You can get it on Rumble. Just look for Generation Health. I want to say thank you to Josiah Schweinberg, operating the cameras back there. Michael Deppish, our editor. Joyce Gibb, who does our private consultation. She's our nurse practitioner. Diane Silverman handles product. Terry does scheduling. Cecilia does distribution. That's Joey DiMatteo. That's Dante DiMatteo. I'm Tyler Andrews, and now it is your turn. Are you going to take what you've heard today and put it into practice, or are you just going to listen? We hope you'll actually do something. That was poorly said, but you know what I'm saying. All right. Have a great day. We'll talk to you guys later.